Hi, I'm Brad Seipert of bradseipert.com, and today I wanted to talk to you about setting up factories in Laravel and using that as a way to mock data for your test environment. So this will be using Laravel and PHP. So I'll just go ahead and jump straight into it and hopefully explain fairly well along the way. So I'm going to go ahead and set up a Docker container in one of my terminals. This is just going to run Postgres for me. Okay, cool. Looks like that's up. So I'm gonna change into my projects directory. And from here, I'm just gonna run Laravel new. We can skip the auth scaffolding for now. And instead, we'll just call this factory test. So this will take a minute. Awesome. So I gave this a few minutes to install dependencies. It's successfully installed everything. So we're just going to cd into factory test. And then let's go ahead and jump straight into our code. So I'm going to swap over to VS Code for this. I'm going to open and factory test is what I want. So we've opened the factory test. I'm going to go into our config, specifically our environment. So in my environment file, I am going to set our DB connection to use Postgres. We can keep it on localhost since we're running on localhost. Postgres' default port, which is the one we're binding to in our Docker containers, 5432. And we have a database of test, a username of test, and a password of test for this example. So this is our local environment. This won't be checked in. You can create an environment file for each environment, or you can use environment variables. There are a couple different options, and we won't go into that in details for deployments in this video. But now that we've done this, we should be able to run PHP artisan migrate. And you can see that we have successfully created a couple different tables. 2014, that's funny. So we've created the users table and the failed jobs table. So we're going to use a couple more artisan commands. So PHP artisan, we're going to make, we want a model, and we want to scaffold out all. So all is going to give us, well, let's check. So all is going to give us a migration, a seeder, a factory, and a resource controller for the model. So if we do PHP artisan make model, we need a name for this model. So I'm just going to call this a license because that's kind of, sorry, let's make model all license. So now that we've made that, we'll have a couple new files that are pretty interesting. So under our database file, we'll have our migration. This is the first one. So we have an ID, and then we have timestamps. So we're going to go ahead and modify this a little bit and add a couple columns to our migration in our table. So we have our license file, and for us, sorry, a license is going to have a name, and this is a string value. Oh, my editor's not going to fix that for me, is it? A string that'll have a licensee. This is the person that owns the license. We can tie it to a specific product. We can give it another string value, like a code. This would be the license code. And then to make things a little more interesting, we can have an expires at date, maybe. And this would be the date that the license expires. So if we go back to our terminal and run PHP artisan migrate, you'll see that we've created the license table, and it's migrated it, which is great. So we have a table that represents this, and we have a model called license. That unfortunately was not a very good name. So we have a license model, and we don't really have to do anything here. Eloquent will take care of binding this license to the table. So we should have access through this model of all of the values in our columns. However, we have no data in our table. So we can actually go into our factories here. And so factories are really interesting. So if you look at this line by line, you will see that we have our factory, and we're defining a new factory. So for this one, we're defining a factory for the license class, and it gets faker injected into this function. So the way that we can do this is we can actually go ahead and return in order, I'm sorry, not in order, return an object or an associative array of our keys. So just to reference these again, we have name, license, product, and code. So Faker is really neat. Faker allows you to specify basically what you want and get fake data. So there's a really great set of documentation for Faker that I'll link in the description, but I know a couple of them that we want to use offhand for doing this pretty recently. So we're going to use one called job title. And the job title here is going to be something like product developer or ice cream chef, something like that. And the point there is that maybe for our license, we name our licenses based off of the job title, or like the role that this license helps you include. It doesn't really matter for this, it's just fake data, but this allows us to scaffold out some objects really quickly, which is nice. So licensee, you could do really whatever you want here. You might want to do an ID if you store users in your table as well. But for now, we're just going to have licensee be a name, and this will just point to the name of the person that owns the license. We can do, product. My. So for the product, we can do, let's just do job title again. This will give us something that sounds like a job title, which might be the name of our product. And then we have a code. So this is kind of nice. So we can say, just give me a random MD5. You can do whatever you want here. So an MD5 is just a hashing algorithm. So this will just give us a hashed code. And then, oops, that was not the right key. And then expires at. We can do faker, and then we can just say, give me a date. So now that we have these, we can do a couple really interesting things. But the main thing that we really want to do with this factory is give us some test data. So we can hook this up into Laravel and check and see if there are no factories, or I'm sorry, if there are no licenses, then call the factory to populate it. We can do different stuff like that. But what I really want to do is just go back to our terminal and run PHP artisan tinker. So artisan tinker is really neat. If you haven't used it, artisan tinker allows you to set up an interpreter that will interpret PHP code in the scope or context of your application. So for us, we can do a couple interesting things. The first one is we can use this factory function that's provided by Laravel, and then we just point to our model. So in this case, it's app/license, and then we need to point to the class. And then we can call create. Yeah, so if you notice here, this is fake data for all of the fields that we just defined in our VS Code. So these all map to actual data in the database. And you can see here, this is how they get created. So faker job title, faker name, etc. So if we do this again, we can get another fake license. So this is the gaming manager, Michelle Glover, and so on and so forth. And you can see the code right there. So this is a really interesting and kind of cool way to go ahead and populate your database. Oops, that's not correct. But if you needed to, specify a certain key, for example, so if I want the name to be Brad's license, we can do that. And you'll notice here that it says Brad's license is the name. So basically it allows you to use the factory to create data, but you can override certain values as well. I believe if we do, yeah, there we go. So you can pass an integer value to the factory as the second parameter, and that will tell you how many, it tells the factory how many of those instances to create. So in this case, if we wanted to create Sorry, let me remove this. We don't want to name them all Brad's license. So if we wanted to create 100, it'll take a minute. Oh, sorry, I need to call create. It'll take a second. Boom, there are 100 new licenses, and you can see here ID 107. So that's how you would use Faker with Laravel's factories to create fake instances of your models, of which then you can persist into your database, use in unit tests, other tests, etc. Anything like that, really. It's actually really cool, and I've found this to be super helpful when developing locally. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. It really helps a ton. Leave a comment if this has been a game changer for the way that you develop your Laravel applications, or if you're just building something cool, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks.